I'd like to move on to the next speaker for today. Next up, we have Valerie. Valerie is no doubt familiar to many of you, but Valerie is a qualified actuary leading the business development team in Swiss Re, based out of Singapore, but she works across Asia. Valerie is a very regular speaker and a contributor to Singapore Actuarial Society events, and a very key contributor to having this super week up and running and coming together as well. So I'd like to welcome Valerie to talk about strategic use of reinsurance for P&C companies.
Thank you, Mehul. Okay, let me share my screen. So usually the insurance companies are steering their business according to two sets of KPI. And today we are going to go through them high level. And then I'll take you through a couple of case studies too, and then we'll wrap up. So the set of KPI that the companies are using usually to be managed are two categories. First one, most important, is they need to survive. And for this, they need to be compliant with the regulation in terms of capital adequacy. And they need to have liquid assets to be able to pay their dues. But then once their survival is not a concern anymore, they also need to perform, which translates most of the time in their valuation drivers. And that's where we get their targets in terms of ROE or cost of equity or growth, and as well their capacity to pay dividends. And reinsurance can help improve insurers' performance on some of these KPI. For example, for the capital adequacy ratio or the solvency margin, we can help increase it often in the region in using quota share, or for life and health, it will be co-insurance solution, because that's helping to cede more risk to the reinsurer. And obviously, as there is more risk ceded out, the need for capital to protect the risk remaining on the balance sheet of the company is reduced. And we will be having one case study about this. But as reinsurance helps reduce the capital requirement, it also enables companies to return capital to the shareholder, and this way allocate that capital to further growth projects and leading to an increase in the ROE through a decrease in the equity. Of course, the reinsurance is here to protect the companies from volatile events, and such protection can also be structured to help increase the expected profit in return for an increase in the risk retained by the companies, and often it's happening through a better diversification across lines of business. Because that's something we see often across the region. As companies are growing, actually their capacity to retain more risk through their own diversification is increasing, but often they don't increase their retention so much. So I think using structured reinsurance, there are ways to increase it maybe in a more acceptable way. And in efficient markets, insurers will get a cheaper cost of equity if the historical volatility of their net combined ratio is smaller. So we see that, for example, for the global insurance companies, like the Japanese Tokio Marine, Sompo, or AXA, Allianz, and so on. We see it a little bit less for the locally rated or locally listed companies, because some of the local markets are maybe less technical, the investors are paying a bit less attention to that. But still, reinsurance, of course, in helping to reduce volatility is for sure helping manage the cost of equity as well. And growth. Growth is an area where maybe companies don't think so often about reinsurance, but as you develop new products to grow in greenfields or address untapped needs so far, your company may want to share on proportional basis a significant portion of this new risk unknown in order to limit the risk of the company balance sheet. And in return for such cover, we usually share some market knowledge or line of business knowledge, experience, which is helping the company also understand better the risk and maybe manage better the risk they are taking on their book. And when growth is inorganic, so that's a M&A, and we observe a number of projects you're facing across Asia, reinsurance can be used to decrease the risk for the buyer or potentially increase the value for the seller by getting a better match between what the buyer is looking for and what the seller can offer. And finally, dividends. So as reinsurance can help free up capital, it enables some companies to increase their capacity to pay out dividend even in difficult times, except when, like this year, the regulators are forbidding companies to pay dividends. So let's look at the case studies. The first one is a capital relief for a company where the pain point is coming mainly from growth. And so here we are looking at a solution which is helping to reduce the net premium. So it's a quota share. And I guess a quota share is something that you will understand quite easily. We have the drawing on the right, which is kind of summarizing it, but basically the insurance company is ceding a given percentage of its premium and ceding the same percentage of its claims. And the percentage is usually anywhere between 10 and 50%. Sometimes it can even be more than 50%. And it's rarely less than 10, I would say, to have some significant impact. And often these structures, which are made for when they are sold for capital relief, they are intended to be relatively cheap. And in order to get a better price condition, we offer them with what we call a sliding scale commission. So sliding scale commission, normally the commission on a quota share treaty is fixed. So let's say if your loss ratio is around 75%, maybe you can expect to get the commission, depending on the market, somewhere between 20 and 24%, something like that. But here the sliding scale commission is working a little bit differently. The better your loss ratio, so the lower your loss ratio, the higher your reinsurance commission will be, and reverse. But there is also a cap to the commission you're getting. So below a certain level of loss ratio, you cannot get more commission, but above a certain level of loss ratio, you cannot get less commission. And that's what is ensuring that there is proper risk transfer, proper protection for the company. So how does it work for the capital relief? You get the chart at the bottom left of the screen, which is showing you at the beginning in the first year, as you are ceding your premium, you get a decrease in the premium risk. And as your claims are coming, you're also starting to cede your claims reserves. And that's where you get a decrease in the reserve risk. And little by little, your decrease in reserve risk, especially in year 2, is biggest because usually these treaties are sold what we call on underwriting year basis. or risk attaching basis. So it means that the claims related to the policies for which the cover is sold in year one, they are usually coming between year one and year two. And so your bigger stock of reserves, you will have it in year two. And then little by little it's decreasing. So we see also the impact for that 1 year treaty is decreasing over time as the claims reserves are getting paid. There is, however, a small increase in the required capital, which is generated by two parts. One is credit risk, because you are ceding, the company is ceding more business to reinsurance than if there was no treaty. So there is this small increase in credit risk, because when you are doing the cession to a well-rated reinsurer, your credit risk factor is still around 1-2%. I would say maximum 4%. If it's with a bad rated reinsurer, it can be more like 16%, 20%. In some markets, it's even 100% if the reinsurer doesn't have a rating. But let's say for a well-rated reinsurer, the credit risk will be much smaller than the risk factor for the premium risk or the reserve risk. So it's still worth looking at reinsurance as a way to reduce the required capital. And the second negative impact is that because you're ceding more business, you get a little bit less diversification benefit from your book of business, depending on whether your quota share is just for one line of business or if it's covering all the lines of business in your portfolio. If it's just one line, you will lose a bit on diversification benefit. But if it's for all lines, then the second case study I would like to take you through is about strategic refocus. So let's start with a little bit with what we mean there. As the premiums currently are falling sharply in some lines of business, and the interest rates are also expected to remain low for some time. And the growth perspective for some lines of business are also shifting. So we expect that more companies will consider changing their focus. And this means either stop writing some lines of business or even exit some markets. And this phenomenon might be accentuated as well by the new regulatory changes coming up, where some companies may find it not really worth going through these changes and prefer stopping writing some business. And there I'm thinking mainly about IFRS 17, where the premium allocation approach is, let's say, very easy and similar to what we are doing currently. But if the companies have to go through the general model, then it's more complex. And so if some companies have some exposure to some long-term policies, maybe they want to stop that so that they don't have to go through the burden of doing the general model approach. So that's what we start observing. For example, in Hong Kong, there was some companies who decided to stop writing workers' compensation business. In India, we saw some companies stopping writing crop insurance. It's not necessarily because of the regulation, it's also because they find that there is too much risk and not enough opportunities for making profit out of the lines of business. And we also saw some, the other version of this strategic refocus, which is companies exiting the market in full. So we saw, for example, QB a couple of years ago exiting Indonesia or Thailand, or Ergo a little bit before exiting Korea. But these were through M&A. So actually they just sold their business to other local players. But now we also see in Hong Kong some companies going in one-off. So they just stop writing any new business and stay alive in a kind of survival mode until they are done with paying all their claims. And the case we are going to discuss now, that's one of these examples, but where the reinsurer is coming into the play. So here I call it a M&A, but it's a special sort of M&A where the buyer for the book is actually Swiss Re. So the seller wanted to exit that market in order to redeploy the capital to some more favorable markets for them. And Swiss Re was taking over that book because it was attractive for us to get a bigger pool of risk to work on a runoff basis. And of course, in covering the risk of adverse development in the claims reserves, we were also getting some premium. So the process for this kind of transaction is always like what I illustrated at the bottom left. We have a due diligence of the balance sheet for the company for sale. And then there is a transfer of loss reserves and assets to the buyer and Swiss Re in case Swiss Re is not the buyer. And then once the risk and the reserves are transferred, then the capital can be released from the seller, so they can bring it back to their parent company. In between, there is also some regulatory approval, and that can take quite some time. So when we look at the features of the treaty, actually, this kind of session, it's usually covering either the one line of business in full or the whole portfolio of a company. And it can last quite some time before the company can get the regulatory approval. So during that time, there is a temporary solution where the company stops writing business and cede its claims reserve risk to the reinsurer. And then once the regulator is fine with a full legal transfer of the claims management and responsibility to the reinsurer, then that's where the sale of the book can be signed between the seller and the reinsurer. Actually, I'm making here a kind of a shortcut as well, because the buyer for the runoff book is not exactly the reinsurer, because the reinsurer has a reinsurance license and it is not authorized to be the legal representative for the claims, for the management of the claims. These have to be taken by a direct insurer. So there would be a direct insurer that would be doing the fronting for the runoff book and be officially responsible for the claims management, even though it's managed by the reinsurer or by some third-party claims manager. And still, the whole risk is carried by the reinsurer. So if we look at the structure, the way the structure is working, it's a little bit like if we were doing a quota share, but on the claims reserve of a company. So there is a certain percentage, usually for this kind of structure, a certain percentage of the claims reserve, which is remaining on the book of the client. And the rest of the claims reserve are ceded to the reinsurer. That's what we call the loss portfolio transfer, LPT. But of course, here, the company wants to be covered for any type of development of the claims. And we know as actuaries that we are doing our best estimate for the amount of the claims reserves, which is booked. But it's quite rare ultimately that when everything is fully paid, it's our initial best estimate, which is the one achieved. There is always some deviation, and so sold together with that loss portfolio transfer, there is what we call the ADC, the adverse development cover, which is paying for any adverse development of the claims reserves above the amount which is booked or ceded to the reinsurer. So the exit point for this adverse development cover has to be quite high because our RBC regimes usually across the region are at 99.5% confidence level. So it means that the exit point for the cover also has to be at 99.5. Otherwise, the regulator will not grant full capital relief for this kind of structure. And usually, when we sell this structure, we ask the client to keep some retention, so keep at least 20 or 30% of its claims reserve on its book to ensure that there is a proper alignment of interest. And still, ceding the remaining 50 or 70% is helping to reduce significantly the risk on the book. So at the bottom right, you can see the chart which is summarizing the capital relief which is provided by this kind of structure. And the very good thing with that structure is that already on day one, when the structure is bought by the company, there is immediately some capital relief. And then that capital relief is decreasing little by little over time as the claims reserves are paid. But in the specific case of the strategic refocus, we are pushing this structure to the extreme. So in that case, the cession rate for this kind of pseudo quota share is 100%. And the exit point is actually kind of infinite. So there is no upper limit for the protection. And this way, the ceding company, the company which is kind of willing to exit the market, is already able to get the full benefit, same as if they were already selling a book of runoff. So I did not mention the cons of the structure before, but actually the cons are not there anymore. So it's a structure which is a little bit more expensive than the traditional LPT-ADC because there is no more guarantee that there is going to be some alignment of interest between the client and us. But on the other side, given that the client is willing to exit the market or exit the market for the specific line of business, there is more certainty that there is going to be a proper cooperation between the company refocusing its book and the reinsurer. So we can accept in these cases to go for 100% cession rate. So for wrapping up, I thought that with all what I've been showing you, there is one key element you did not know yet: how to assess the cost return for such solutions. And given that you're an actuarial audience, I thought I can go a little bit more into technical concepts. So the way we are proposing to our clients to compute the benefit of such solution is to compute the ratio between the net present value of the expected loss of earnings for the solution. So really what is the cost of the solution, but projected over time, over the future years. And divide this by the net present value of the capital relief. And that one, we need to multiply it by the target capital adequacy ratio. I will tell you why. And we also take into account the potential increase in available capital that you may have. There might be some increase in available capital because in some cases, your level of reserve booked is very high, too high in comparison to what we think should be booked. And so in such case, we are paying to the insurer some money to get that amount of reserves ceded to us. So in that case, there would be an increase in available capital. I must say this is only because there is some discounting impact as well. And that's valid as long as we are not in IFRS 17, so just a couple of years left. And maybe that's generating the sense of urgency for you to explore this kind of solution. So the second point I wanted to explain is why we multiply by the target capital adequacy ratio here. So the intention for this formula is to enable the companies to compare reinsurance, the cost return of reinsurance, to the cost return of alternative options. And most of the time, the alternative options, when it's about capital management, are about increasing shareholder equity or issuing debt. And when you increase the shareholder equity or debt, you are acting on the numerator for your capital adequacy ratio. While when you're reducing the required capital, you're acting on the denominator. And if your target RBC ratio is just 1, then there is no problem. But if your target RBC ratio is 2, then anything that you do on the numerator, on the denominator, will have double impact in comparison to what you're doing on the numerator. So in order to reflect this kind of double impact or accelerated impact, we multiply here by the target capital adequacy ratio. And then here at the bottom of the slide, I've been putting for you the different components, how we compute the loss of earnings or the capital relief. I think there is not too much difficulty. The other reason thing I wanted to mention is why do we look at the net present value for all this? Is because we need to make a fair comparison again between reinsurance and the alternative options. And if you issue equity, you will have it theoretically forever. If you issue debt, you will have it for maybe 10 years. But your reinsurance will have some impact for, we've seen on the previous slide, maybe 3-4 years, depending on if you buy quota share or if you buy LPT ADC, and how long tail is your claims reserve. So in order to properly reflect the cost return of the different options, that's why we get this NPV concept. So in conclusion, we know that reinsurance is a broad risk transfer tool that can be used for actually much more than cat protection. And with a scarcer capital, changing demands, regulation, new problems are arising across the industry. And reinsurance might be able to help address them for your company. Thus, don't hesitate to reach out to your reinsurer or your reinsurance broker to discuss any issue that may pop up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Very, very, very interesting, and very interesting case studies as well to make it quite real for the audience in the examples that you showed. So thank you for that. I was wondering, the current climate of obviously uncertain emergence of risks in the future, hardening reinsurance rates through the course of this year, potentially continuing forward. How does that affect the dynamic in which companies will be, or cedants or insurers will be looking at sort of alternative structures and looking for something like this?
Actually, the pain is still there. That's the attractiveness of reinsurance, which might change. But again, we also have market constraints, appetite constraints, and what is seen as a hardening market in a lot of places is not hardening necessarily everywhere, and not necessarily for all lines of business. So I think there is always room for discussion. And it's really, I think, on a case-by-case basis that we can see if there is something to be done or if really it's not worth looking into how reinsurance can help.
That's interesting. And I think the changing regulatory, I mean, I guess reinsurers have historically been always there in times of uncertainty, actually, and the capital kind of flows up towards reinsurers historically, and often the buck stops with the reinsurer to come in to maybe navigate that I guess times of uncertainty. I think we're entering a period, or we have a period of greater levels of uncertainty, not just because of COVID-19, but changing regulatory environment around the region. Obviously, there's IFRS 17, but the way capital is looked at and how it's calculated and sort of risk appetites and tolerances around the region is going to change. So, very interesting to think about reinsurance in that regard, and not just cat protection or earnings volatility protection.
Yeah. On the other side, we have to be fair, and reinsurance is not just about replacing capital. If a company is really in need for capital for long term to support growth, I think it has to be using its shareholder capital. But for some bridge or short time, can be useful. Yeah.
Thank you, Valerie. If there's no other questions, then we could recoup a little bit of time and have a bit of a break. The next session will start at 3:45 Singapore time, so that's 12 minutes time. So we can all rejoin then. Thank you very much, Valerie.